Okay.
Recording in progress.
Indeed. Hello, audience, wherever you may hail. I'm your host, John Bruni. Welcome to The Focus, where we bring you the most thought-provoking and informative current affairs analysis from around the world. Each episode, we invite top experts and analysts to share their insights on the most pressing issues of our time, from international relations and global economics to philosophy and science. No topic is off limits. Join us as we explore the complex and ever-changing landscape of the world, where we provide valuable perspectives on the events that shape our global community. On the evening of Sunday, June 4th, Australian investigative journalist Ross Coulthart sat down with US government whistleblower David Charles Grusch, who made some sensational claims about a hidden UFO retrieval program within the US government. These claims, if true, would be nothing short of earth-shattering and could potentially go down as one of the most profound discoveries in human history. However, as the late Carl Sagan famously said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far no concrete evidence has been presented to support Grusch's claims. No pictures, no videos, just hearsay. But even if evidence were to emerge, can we trust our own eyes in a world where advanced hoaxes and AI-generated images can easily deceive us? Grusch, a former high-ranking US intelligence official, has filed his claim to Congress and the Inspector General of US Intelligence, making him one of the most senior individuals to expose such a deep and long-held conspiracy within the US deep state. It's a story that seems straight out of Hollywood, but one that needs a closer look. Joining us today is famous international debunker Mick West. Mick is a British expat living in the US who closely monitors and exposes dubious claims. Mick, thank you for joining us once again on The Focus.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Mick, what were your initial thoughts upon hearing the Coulthart interview with Grusch on News Nation?
Well, I think, again, we'd seen bits of it before in snippets, and there wasn't that much more that came out. There was a number of interesting things. But I think the thing that really kind of resonated most was the lack of evidence, for a start, and the extraordinary nature of the claims, for which, as you say, require extraordinary evidence. So all we've got so far is David Grusch making claims which are really increasingly outlandish, I would say. I think if you just started with the fairly simple claim that we have some kind of crash retrieval program that has recovered some materials and we don't know what they are, and we're analyzing them. Yeah, I mean, that seems fairly straightforward, and maybe that was a secret program that was there, and perhaps when he discovered it, they didn't want him to know about it, and then they retaliated against him for that. But he takes that simple story, which I think would almost be understandable, and if it was true, and he adds on things like that aliens have killed people, and he adds on things like the American government has killed people to cover this up. Then there's more. I mean, there's the Pope was involved back in 1944 to help transport at the end of World War II, or during World War II at the time, transport this UFO that crashed in Italy in 1933, and Mussolini had it for several years. These things, the kind of piling one thing upon the other, makes the story seem increasingly unrealistic, and kind of makes me think that someone has been taken for a ride here, either if it's Grusch himself or the American public.
Mick, while I was watching the longer version of the Coulthart interview the other day, I noticed that Coulthart and Grusch were gathered around a table, and they were looking at documents that seemed to have been redacted. Now, of course, we didn't get a close-up view of those documents. We sort of think that these documents may have indicated that, yes, there was a UFO retrieved in Italy during the close of World War II. The Vatican was involved, and all we saw was a piece of paper on the table that had been basically blocked out. So you had no real evidence that was being presented. And Ross Coulthart standing there going, oh my God, yes, there's the evidence, So do we take a journalist's view of being absolutely surprised by this as fact of something that happened? I just don't
Yeah.
understand how someone as senior as Ross Coulthard, I mean, great respect to the man. I mean, he's done an enormous amount of good as an investigative journalist. But what I don't get is, why has he seemingly crucified himself on a story that, as you rightly point out, is just so incredible at so many different levels? You could literally write a Hollywood script on this blasted thing.
Well, you obviously be more familiar with Ross, coming from down under, but in the States, as far as I know, he's only known as a UFO journalist. He's been doing a number of stories on UFOs, and he's done some, documentaries or special reports, and I believe he's written a book as well.
Yeah.
But it's all UFOs, and I think that's pretty much been his focus for a number of years now.
Mm.
And I think that kind of, makes him less of a disinterested observer, a journalist who is just discovering this type of thing for the first time, and more something of an advocate for the cause.
Mm.
It seems to me that he's part of a group of people who seem to be pushing a narrative, and they'll do whatever they can to push that narrative forward because they believe it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
Their intentions are good. They think that technology is being withheld from us that could greatly help humanity. And that this is basically the type of thing that that Dave Grusch also said. He seems to have these same kind of altruistic motives.
Mm.
But time and time again, when people make claims like this, that there is something to it, we never get the actual evidence. We just get this belief. And another thing that happens over and over again is that the evidence comes in the form of testimony. It's something somebody said to somebody else. Like, I was told that this particular encounter happened. I was told that we have this material. We never get to see any actual evidence, and when we do, it kind of falls away because it's not generally very good quality. Like these videos that have come out. We get a video like the Green Triangle video,
Yep.
best UFO video of all time, according to Jeremy Corbell.
Mm.
And then it turns out these green triangles are just stars and planes and drones, then just made triangular through the camera. So we've got this repetition of claims, hearsay, and very poor evidence. And here we don't even have the evidence.
Mm.
All we've got is people saying that a number of people have said things, and that there are some documents. So it's very difficult for the public, I think, to have any basis for taking this seriously. And I would encourage everybody to be extraordinarily skeptical on this matter.
I've always been fascinated by the notion of people keeping a straight face during a lie, whether they're consciously knowledgeable of the lie or not. There's this notion of coherence within the story. And, I'm reminded by the fact of what we were discussing a little earlier, and that is that it's a complex layered story that they're trying to sort of push toward the public. And had this story been a little less over the top, had it been a simpler story that we're telling, it may have stuck at a more fundamental level, even among skeptical people.
Yeah.
And I'll put my hand up and say I'm one of them. But,
Yeah.
it's like if the story sounds too weird, people are just going to back up and say, hey, that can't be right.
Yeah, definitely. And that aspect of it comes through in a number of ways. The first one is that Leslie Kane, who wrote this story in the debrief with Ralph Blumenthal, and not coincidentally, she also wrote the original story for the New York Times, which David Grusch says was what got him interested in UFOs in the first place. This is the first he heard about it. He saw it and thought it was nonsense and started looking into it. This very story, and then 6 years later, he's being interviewed by Leslie Keane again. But Leslie Keane has said that she didn't talk to him about the bodies. So she didn't, I don't know if she even knew anything at all about them, but she said she didn't talk to him. And if she had, she wouldn't put it in the story because it seems like outside the scope of what she's interested in. She just wants to go with the simple story. We have a secret UFO crash retrieval program, and it's being covered up. That's her story, and she thinks that's enough. Which, as you say, it would be. But people can't help but add on more things. And she's like backing away from this. She's saying, no, I would love to hear what she says about the even more extreme things. Like, what does she have to say about the fact that aliens have killed people?
Yeah.
And then there's the people who are telling the story. I think they believe a more extreme version of it. They've been told things that are pretty extreme, and they're kind of anxious to get that out. So Dave Grusch is saying, oh yeah, we have an agreement between us and the aliens, or at least we should look into that because it seems that way. And he says, like, there's been this big cover up. We're selling things to military industrial companies like Lockheed Martin, and then they're selling it back to the government, and this is all illegal. So he's adding on this whole other layer of conspiracy. And then there's what he describes it in his statement as a publicly unknown Cold War for recovered and exploited physical material that has been waged under the noise floor for decades, which is kind of a weird thing, that there's this Cold War between nations, like between us and Russia and China, and all the countries are involved, which adds on this huge extra layer of complication.
Yeah.
And then there's people around him. He has a team of people who are helping him, and they probably found him and kind of brought him forward. But one of those people is Danny Sheehan, famous lawyer. He worked on the Pentagon Papers case many years ago. Now he does a lot of UFO stuff, goes to UFO conferences, hangs out with UFO people all the time, tries to promote disclosure because he's a big fan of helping humanity. He said that one of the craft that actually crashed was the size of a football stadium, but only on the inside. On the outside, it was only 30 feet across. So it's like Doctor Who's TARDIS,
right?
Which, so it's getting even more ridiculous if you start talking to the other people involved. And I'm sure, like, if you broaden the scope of who you're talking to in the team, we're going to get like weird things like telepathy and people coming from other dimensions and things like that. But it's obviously these people all believe a fairly extreme version of reality that does not comport with the facts, and they've tried to make it palatable, but they're kind of failing, and their strangeness is slipping through the cracks.
I just want to go into the legal cases that seem to be brewing behind the scenes. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, this information had been passed apparently by the Pentagon through a particular agency where information has to be vetted before it can get released into the public. The one strange thing on top of all the other strange things with regard to this story is, if this is, all right, audience, forgive me, I'm going to be using a bad word here. If this is all bullshit, right? If this is all bullshit, and the Pentagon knows it, but they then give the tick to allow this guy, who's a highly placed intelligence officer, to go public with a story that is so incredible that it simply cannot be true, at least not in this universe.
Yeah.
What does that say about the Pentagon? I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, Mick, but what does that say about those guys? Are they trying to play a joke on everybody?
No, it's really quite simple. Bullshit isn't classified. The Pentagon's office, DOPSA, is the Department of Pre-Publication and Security Review. They exist for two purposes. One purpose is to check official government products for accuracy and not having classified material in. So if a military unit's commander wants to issue a press statement or something, it goes through DOPSA, and they make sure it's accurate, and they make sure that it doesn't contain any classified information that would help our adversaries. They also exist to check things that people publish after they leave the military. So if you leave the military and you want to publish something in your own time, or if you're still in the military and you want to write a novel or something that involves things that were in the military, they do a pre-publication review of that. Now that is only checked for lack of classified material. So the only thing they want to check within that review is, like, is this revealing any secrets? If you write this big science fiction novel about how the military is it's fighting transdimensional tarantulas, that's fine. They would approve that. because it doesn't reveal any secrets.
Right.
So if you have a statement that's composed mostly of bullshit, they'll be perfectly fine with it because it doesn't reveal any secrets, and you are allowed to publish fiction out there. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to lie. You're allowed to tell lies, so long as it's not going to be something that's libelous, which would probably be a different thing entirely. That would be a different court thing. That's not DOPSA's function. They're just checking to see if there's any secrets, and apparently there isn't any secrets in this. Apparently it's not secret that we have an agreement with aliens. It's not secret that they perform this specific metallic analysis on parts and find odd isotopic ratios, which if we were analyzing an enemy machine, we wouldn't go around saying what type of analyses we've done on that. That would be something that would be classified. So the fact that he's saying that we've done this, it means it maybe didn't happen, or it happened in like outside of the military. It was some buddies of his who did it, or it's something that they did this analysis and it doesn't really show anything in particular. But the idea that they did a specific analysis and they proved something was an alien spacecraft, that would be classified. That's a detail.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not even just a characterization. That's a specific detail that they had odd isotope ratios. And then all the other stuff, like aliens have been killing people, not classified. It's, what if it's not classified, why aren't people talking about it? It's not secret even. It's anyone could say it. Now, the kind of the excuse that some of the people give for that is that it's an illegal program. So DOPSA wouldn't know about it, so they wouldn't know that they weren't allowed to release any information about it. But that doesn't make any sense because there's a vast amount of information that he can't give us. So obviously there's actual classified information that he's not giving us about this illegal programming. So they couldn't just say like, oh, well, there's an illegal program that exists. You can talk about, you can reveal the existence of this illegal program, but you can't reveal any detail. That wouldn't work. They would know about it if they know about all the details that they can't now release. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the simplest explanation is that what he's been saying and what's being cleared isn't actually accurate.
Well, the bullshit detector must have worked at some fundamental level with regard to mainstream media, because of course they just didn't pick up the story at all. It fell onto the debrief, which is some sort of minor paper dealing specifically with UFOs and the weird and the wacky. And then, of course, you had News Nation, which is one of these new little startup enterprises looking for their first big story to break it upon their, to make themselves, to make their success known, basically. So what you think that in this sense, the claims that Grusch put forward were being too outlandish for even, the likes of the New York Times to put out this time round? I mean, the first time in 2017, when Keane and Blumenthal came out with the original story, it was intriguing. There wasn't that much information forthcoming, but there was enough to keep people interested. But now it's just like a multi-layered pile of steaming crap on the table that no one wants to touch, except for the fringes of the media.
Yeah, I think the media is being rightfully very cautious about this because you read the story and it sounds like something from like the Globe or News of the World, like one of those extreme tabloids. It's like aliens are killing people, giant football fields sized inside out TARDISes. It's not like a sensible story, which of course is why they wanted to make it sensible. Leslie Keane wrote this original story that kind of started the whole ball rolling, both for everybody outside and for Grusch. And she says she left things out of that story because they were too extreme. There was a bunch of things that happened apparently, and maybe like telepathic communication and things like that, that she didn't talk about because she wanted to promote the idea of disclosure. She's not really interested in getting everything out there because it turns people off. And maybe that's a valid thing if it's actually true, if the world is actually as topsy-turvy as this suggests, and there's multiple races of aliens, which is something else that he claimed, that there's more than one type of aliens, one of which is malevolent, the other one presumably less malevolent. Maybe that's the one that does the crop circles. Crop circles are getting very popular now. But yeah, it's difficult to understand, like, why even, say, News Nation took it seriously. The Debrief, I can see they've done a lot of UFO stuff. News Nation, they do like silly UFO stories, like there was a alien in someone's backyard in Las Vegas, and they cover that because it's like a kind of a fun thing. But this is much more serious.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they're taking this seriously, it's even a little bit surprising for them. I mean, they're not a small organization. They're like, part of a $1 billion corporation. So it's not like this tiny little channel. So I think, maybe they just thought they would. Maybe they got convinced somehow. Maybe Ross is a smooth talker, and he told them that it was going to be good.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of grown, and I think they're starting to be a bit more skeptical. They're starting to ask questions. I was on News Nation a couple of times, 3 times actually. Once with Cuomo, who's kind of the headliner of the show, of the channel. And he was quite skeptical about the whole thing. And I think in coming days, we'll see more of that, because people are going to be asking tough questions. We're probably not going to be getting anything coming out of Congress confirming this. And we'll probably get some of the members of Congress will start to distance themselves from this story. It's kind of already, they're being a bit tentative. And we'll just be left with the more eccentric members of Congress, like Tim Burchett, who's a big fan of UFOs. And the more sensible ones will just move on to other things.
Yeah. Grusch's story is also intriguing for another reason, and that is because of his background in US intelligence. Tim, Mick, why should people believe Grusch or anyone else coming from the intelligence services? I mean, what makes them so credible in the eyes of the public?
Well, you have to be very vetted to work in the intelligence service. You have to get top secret clearance, and there's another level called top secret secure compartmented information, TSSCI, where you're allowed to be read into specific programs which have their own individual security classification. And he had this security classification. I think more broadly it's referred to as Title 50, which means that he was trusted to be told secrets. And he was involved in creating the president's daily briefing, and he even couriered it to the White House. Although I'm not really sure exactly why being a secure courier is a great endorsement. But he was trusted by the intelligence community. But then I think you've also got to look at the next thing, which is then he wasn't. Because what happened was in 2017, he read the New York Times article. He got really interested in this. He joined the UAP task force at some point, which was run at the time by Jay Stratton, and his chief scientist was Travis Taylor, who was this kind of odd figure. He's kind of a scientist, but also a TV scientist. He's on Ancient Aliens, constantly spouting off about aliens and secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, talking about portals and wormholes in space. Very unscientific. But anyway, so Dave Grusch joins the UAP task force, I think initially as a liaison for the reconnaissance office, which does like satellite imageries. And he's hooking up with Jay Stratton and Travis Taylor, who do not seem like very reputable people in terms of their qualifications, what they've actually said about UFOs. I think they're both strong believers in this. You get it from Travis Taylor on his TV appearances, and Jay Stratton has talked about strange paranormal experiences he's had, and people have come forward saying that he talks a lot about ghosts and he didn't do enough actual investigating of UAPs, and perhaps that's why we missed these Chinese balloons years ago, because we had him working there. So I think Grusch was influenced by these people, and eventually got the idea that there was this secret program going on, and then other people came in who have made similar claims in the past, and they're very well spoken, very persuasive. People like Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis and Gary Nolan, these people who are well known within the UFO community. They show him stuff, they explain stuff to him, and he gets convinced. And then in 2022, he files this whistleblower complaint with the DoD IG, the Department of Defense Inspector General. And at that point, I think they stop trusting him, because he's, as he describes it, he said that he was getting retaliated against, and they were kind of impugning his decision-making abilities, his mental health, and his good character and things like that. So yeah, I think at that point, either he's discovered this top secret program, or he's got convinced of this illusory top secret program and is starting kind of behaving erratically, because he's believing this thing that doesn't actually exist. He's starting to believe that aliens are killing people and all these things are happening. And he's going around like discussing it with people and saying he's going to blow the whistle. And then he files this whistleblower complaint. So by retaliating against him, really what they're doing is that they are rightfully concerned that he is kind of becoming a little bit irrational, if this story is in fact false. If it's true, of course, then that's fine, but it doesn't look like it's true. So when they don't actually trust him now, is my basic point.
Yeah, rather sad downfall for a man of his career and expertise. I mean, ultimately you have to just sit down and think, my God, something tragic or terrible must have happened to have triggered someone into this sort of belief structure.
I don't know though. I don't know if you need a tragic or terrible thing. I think it's, I looked into a lot of conspiracy theory beliefs, and people can just slide into them. They can just kind of get in like a little bit at a time. And often it's like they see some one piece of particularly compelling evidence. Like, for example, he might have gone to the UAP task force and said, like, what about this gimbal video? Yeah, that's probably just, was probably, he says he originally thought it was a near peer adversary technology, like someone else's drone or something like that. And so he goes to the UAP, task force, and then he asks Travis Taylor, the chief scientist, what do you think of this? And Travis Taylor tells him, well, I think it's a UFO, and here's why I think it's a UFO. And then he says, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. And so he starts believing that's a UFO. And once you believe one thing is an alien spaceship, it takes very little to believe something else. So I don't think he's necessarily had some kind of nervous breakdown or anything like that. I think he's just been convinced over years that this is actually true, to the extent that he can't see how ridiculous his claims are. So his judgment has been compromised, but it's not like he's going crazy or anything like that.
Okay, so the US government and other governments worldwide are undoubtedly working on advanced military technologies. Could Grusch be the front man for an operation designed to keep the myth of UFOs alive, diverting attention from real classified programs?
Well, it's possible, and that's something people have suggested as a thing, like that this is, perhaps he discovered some program, and then they started feeding him all this extra information that just makes his claims look ridiculous. And this is the type of thing that has been, strongly suggested before. People have made claims that this has actually happened, and I think at the very least, the military does actually let UFO stories grow, if not encourage them. And they probably do encourage them to a certain degree as well, because it provides good cover for things like test flights of equipment. Like when the U-2 came out, it got reported as a UFO all the time because it flew at 65,000 feet where nothing else flew. So pilots were seeing, things flying high above them, and they reported it, and it was just kind of brushed under the carpet as a UFO. And to a certain extent, I think there was some encouragement of the ridiculing of UFOs to kind of keep that not being looked into quite so seriously historically. So that's certainly, that type of thing is possible. But I think when you look at this particular case, it doesn't really make sense, because we're still getting this congressional investigation. we're still getting people actually looking into it. It didn't really work if they tried to ridicule it, even though his claims are ridiculous on their face. It still kind of got through. But that's a possibility I wouldn't want to rule out, but it doesn't really seem super likely to me. I mean, for one thing, that type of kind of propaganda against the American public is illegal. You're not supposed to spend money on changing the minds of the American people in a deceptive manner like that. So if someone was caught doing that, then it seems like the problems would outweigh the benefits. And I think there are probably better ways of handling it. They should just increase their security and not actually have these leaks actually happen. Because covering it up by inventing UFOs seems like a pretty outlandish and extreme way of doing it.
Well, if, as you suspect, there's no substance to Grusch's claims and he's exposed as a pawn of a larger game, or maybe just exposed as being deluded at some point, what impact do you think it's going to have on legitimate scientific research into UFOs and the search for extraterrestrial life generally?
I don't think it'll change it that much. I think right now we have a bit of momentum going in terms of searching for UFOs. I don't think those programs will be changed because they overlap with real issues. UFO or UAP could be a foreign drone. It could be an airspace incursion by a foreign power, or it could be representative of a systems failure or a procedural failure that we need to address. So things like Arrow, the Pentagon's body investigating UAPs, I mean, that should continue. They need to figure out what's going on. NASA's looking into it as well. There's nothing wrong with that. They'll do a report at some point. Avi Loeb, this Harvard scientist, has a program where he's setting up telescopes and other equipment on rooftops to try to capture a much better photo of a UFO. There's nothing wrong with that. He's spending someone else's money, but it's not my money, so I'm fine with that. And then the search for life outside of the solar system isn't going to be impacted at all. That's really kind of unrelated, and the science there is still solid, and we're still going to have the James Webb Space Telescope is going to be looking at distant planets and seeing if there are technosignatures in the atmosphere of planets. You can kind of see when the planet goes between you and the sun, you can kind of see how the light filters through and then detect kind of the chemical composition of it. And you can see, does it have any not sure what the thing would be, like nitrogen sulfides or something obscure. And you can tell if there's life. That's not going to change. The searching for radio signals is not going to change. I mean, this is just a very specific issue. He's claiming that there are crashed flying saucers that we've retrieved. If it turns out we haven't retrieved crashed flying saucers, it throws a lot of disrepute upon him, upon Ross Coulthart, and all the other people who went along with the story. But it's not going to impact these other things.
One of the things that is really intriguing about everything that we've said so far, and you've already touched on it, but I'd like you to give our listeners a little bit more of an insight into this, and that is that many figures involved in the current UFO UAP narrative seem to have some connection to the Skinwalker Ranch, a place associated with many spooky paranormal activities. Could you please explain the importance of Skinwalker to the current UFO UAP discussion?
Yeah, Skinwalker Ranch, when you look at it now, it's a TV show, and they think that the ranch has a supernatural presence of some sort, maybe alien spaceship buried underneath it, and they do lots of fun experiments trying to figure it out. But the history of Skinwalker Ranch goes a lot further back to the 1990s, when it was actually bought by a guy called Robert Bigelow, who is I believe at the time he was like a real estate billionaire or millionaire. He had a chain of motels. He later kind of segued into some kind of spaceship research, but he bought the ranch because he was super interested in the supernatural and in UFOs. And reputedly, the ranch was haunted. Beings could come into the ranch from other dimensions. They were seeing UFOs all the time. So he thought it was an ideal place to set up his new endeavor, which was basically he'd got a bunch of scientists together including Hal Puthoff, who is one of the people now involved with this thing. A bunch of scientists he got together, and he kind of installed a team at the ranch to study this supernatural phenomena, and kind of a legend grew around this ranch. And at some point, he became friends with Robert Bigelow. Not Robert, sorry, Harry Reid. Robert Bigelow became friends with Harry Reid, who is a senior senator. He's since passed away, but he was like the House Majority Lead for a long time, the Senate Majority Lead. And he got convinced, Harry Reid got convinced of the whole UFO story. And he kind of used his government connections and brought people onto the ranch. Kind of like people from the Pentagon came to the ranch. There was a guy called James Lakatsky came to the ranch. And one of these people had some kind of experience on the ranch, like a manifestation of some tubular bells appeared in front of him in the kitchen. And this guy was convinced enough by this that he decided that they had to set up an investigation program into this. And so with Harry Reid's help, they set up this kind of covert investigation of Skinwalker Ranch, this haunted UFO flying ranch. They set it up with government money, Pentagon money, and they disguised it as being a program that was looking into advanced aerospace technology, but really it was looking into the ranch. And that's what started this UFO program that was eventually written about by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal in the 2017 article that Dave Grusch read that got him really interested in UFOs. It started this program called ORSAP that then became the ATIP program, which was where kind of Lou Elizondo came in. And then all these other people are connected to Skinwalker Ranch. If you look at the other people who have been talking about this, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, they're big Skinwalker Ranch fans. All these other people have been to Skinwalker Ranch, and it was eventually sold by Robert Bigelow to Gary Nolan, probably because there wasn't very much going on. And now it's this super popular place. And the chief scientist of the UAP task force, which is the organization that Dave Grusch kind of joined and that got him really into the whole thing. Their chief scientist is also the chief scientist. He's one of the chief scientists at Skinwalker Ranch, paid for by the new owner, Brandon Fugel, who's another guy who's really interested in this type of thing and has a lot of money to spare. So there's this huge web of connections going to Skinwalker Ranch, and not just like a bunch of people, but the Pentagon. The Pentagon is deeply involved. They actually spent money, unbeknownst to most of them, investigating this thing. And I think this is an aspect of the story that has been sadly missed by the mainstream media, partly because it's a ridiculous story. Yeah. But unlike Dave Grusch's story, this one is verifiably true. There's documented evidence of all of this. We know that Harry Reid got this program passed and got this ORSAP program started. And, it's supposedly a government program is meant to be sent out for tender, but it ended up going to his friend, Robert Bigelow. So essentially he set up a program for Robert Bigelow to study interesting things on his own ranch, and by fooling people in the Pentagon that they were studying something else. And then all these people have been involved ever since. And this is partly why we are where we are now. And this is partly why Dave Grusch got convinced of this type of thing. It's a bit troubling. I think it indicates to me some kind of systemic failure within the Pentagon. If this type of thing can go on, people develop these beliefs. I mean, maybe they caught it with Dave Grusch, and that's why he's no longer with the Pentagon. But it happened, and it's happened with other people like Jay Stratton and Travis Taylor.
Fugel, the current owner of Skinwalker, wants to turn the place into a paranormal Disneyland, doesn't he?
Not really. He said that he is only interested in scientific experiments, and he seems like an honest guy. And I pretty much believe that right now that's what he wants to do. He's making a little money from it. They've got like a website where you can join and pay $5 a month to be an insider, but I'm sure that's not very much money. And he's a very rich guy because he's like the biggest real estate developer in Salt Lake City, or maybe just Provo. But he's a very rich guy, and he does lots of other stuff beside this. So I don't think his motives are necessarily bad, but I think the science, the so-called science that they do at Skinwalker Ranch is just terrible. They do the most ridiculous experiments, and they do them very sloppily, and then they completely misinterpret the results. And this has been going on for many, many years. And yet, this place supposedly is the crux of the entire like UFO thing that's going on right now. I'm sure Dave Grusch is probably familiar with it.
Now, Mick, some believers in UFOs may hold on to their conspiracy theories despite any debunking efforts, as we know. But should we allow this surge of public interest to fizzle out on its own, or is there value in challenging these claims while they're still popular?
I think there's definitely value. I think people need to know the context of these things. Things like, that Skinwalker Ranch was involved. And if someone else is making a false claim, you don't just let it slide. You don't just say, oh, well, it will be sorted out later. And, the people are making essentially false claims. And already there's been retractions. There was a story in the debrief where they actually, was it in the debrief? I think it might have been in the Hill, which is part of News Nation's parent company. So there's a story on the Hill where they said that the stories of ET flying crash had been verified by the lawyer that was working for Grusch. But it turns out that wasn't true. The lawyer actually took the rather strange or unusual step of issuing a statement kind of denying this and saying, yeah, we no longer work with Dave Grusch, and we've been misrepresented in the media, and all we did was file a very narrowly tailored whistleblower complaint, and it didn't speak to the specifics of what he's been saying, and they took no position on that. And so the Hill had to revise this piece to say, something much less impressive. Before it was like, verified by attorneys, or like the Inspector General verifies claims of UFOs, and then it was changed to verifies claims of a cover-up. So no details, it's just a cover-up. But yeah, it's we've got to keep the pressure on. But that said, I want an investigation by Congress. I want Congress to look into this and figure out what's going on. I'm not trying to stop it. I don't believe that there's aliens, but I'm not trying to stop them investigating these claims. I think they should really get in there and look and see exactly what happened and hold hearings and hold investigation, because it's kind of messed up that it's got this far. It's, for one thing, it's kind of destroys public trust in the government if people are all thinking that, we're keeping like this terrible thing secret, that aliens are killing people and the government's not telling us about it, and the government's killing people to cover it up. We got to look into that. If it's true, which I doubt, then, we'll do something about that. If it's not true, then we'll do something about that.
I'm John Bruni, and you're listening to Sage International's The Focus podcast. And from the United States, we're speaking with science investigator Mick West. Mick, what's it been like being the key debunker in all of this? I mean, you obviously have to stay in touch with the UFO community at some level on social media. How's this journey been for you?
It's been very interesting. I think I got my start in UFOs by investigating UFO videos, which is what I still do, and I still enjoy doing that. Recently, there haven't been that many good videos. It seems like for a while we were getting like new, interesting videos from leaked government things, and even a few from the government themselves. So that was kind of interesting. And there's a few, but I also enjoy talking to people and discussing the topic, and I enjoy trying to figure out what's going on in their heads. They're not crazy, but they're being convinced of things. Yeah. So I enjoy that part of the conversation. And this has really kind of ramped everything up, though. Like, everybody in the UFO community is really interested in this topic. A significant chunk of them think this is it. Mm-hmm. They think this is disclosure. The government is going to tell us what they know, and it's going to be a utopian new world as we get all this amazing technology, curing disease and getting rid of pollution and having free energy. So they think this is all going to happen. Or at least we'll learn a bunch of interesting things about aliens. And there's a few skeptical people as well, but there's a vast number of people who feel very anxious that this be true. And it's not all just people who are like, wouldn't it be great if we got this new technology? There are people, a lot of people, who have had some personal experience with a UFO. Like they have seen a UFO, or they've had an experience meeting an alien of some sort that they think actually happened, and they strongly believe it, and they want validation.
Yeah.
They want people to know that they were not crazy, as sometimes they can perceive other people perceiving them, but that they were actually correct. So they're very anxious that it be true. So there's thousands and thousands of people out there who are very anxious that this be true, and that some of them get angry with me because I point out issues, and they think I'm trying to suppress the story, which I'm not. I want it investigated. But their anger, I think, is understandable. I mean, some people are not very nice, and that's not good. But I think a lot of people, their anger is coming from a genuine concern, either for for the world, or for their own position, or a combination of things. So there's strong emotions out there, but I'm used to it, and I know that most people mean well.
You think that all of this sort of comes at a very peculiar time in human history? I mean, there have been many people saying, well, why now? Why is this move toward disclosure being pushed now? But then when you look at the way that the world has been shaped, we've got our climate change crisis, we've got war in Europe, we've got the fact that we're going to be deploying what in the very near term could be sentient AI in our homes and offices, which ironically is a truly disruptive and alien technology, which we built by our own hands. I mean, do you think that there's something to be said for the fact that we're all looking for some sort of silver bullet solution to many complicated problems? And in the mindset that we're talking about in terms of David Grusch and the whole belief in UFOs, there's this notion that if only we could find that silver bullet, if only we could find the mysterious alien technology that would be able to mitigate against all human foibles, we'll be okay. Is there also this element playing into things, you think?
I think to a degree, but I also think that that type of desire has always existed. If you look back at the history of the free energy movement, there's a lot of people who think that the government has hidden like carburetors that can allow cars to go 200 miles per gallon, or run off a single 9-volt battery, things like that. And they believe it quite strongly, and they're fighting for government disclosure of the 9-volt battery car. And I think the same kind of feelings exist within the UFO community. So I think that really hasn't changed, and it's something that's really been similar since the dawn of the UFO age back in the 1940s and 50s. I think what's different now really is that the UFO community has done a good job of publicizing a number of stories, starting with the 2017 article, which is the kind of the root cause of a lot of this right now. And this particular piece of interest has been building in the media. That article started the public interest, but it also started Dave Grusch's interest and got him to a position where now he is releasing this information. So I think we're seeing kind of a combination of, it's the spirit of the times, which hasn't really changed, but it's also these stories kind of coming to a head because of the long-running efforts of a small group of people, but also on top of that, kind of taking advantage of the change in the media cycle. We see it coming out in these small outlets like the Debrief and News Nation, and it's still getting a lot of traction. It was great for them that the first story came out in the New York Times, but this kind of shows that you can release in other settings and still get a reasonable amount of traction for a story like this. Obviously, it would have been a lot more had it been in the New York Times, and I'm sure they deeply regret not being able to do that. But media is highly fragmented now, and it's quite easy for things like a YouTube channel to have more views than a CNN episode. So if Joe Rogan talks about this, like I think he did like a 20-minute segment on it a few days ago, millions of people are going to see, that's that thing, and they're going to get really interested in it, and then they'll go and watch the News Nation thing. They'll probably watch it on YouTube or wherever. But that it's media doesn't rely so much on the story being accepted by the mainstream. You can still get a very big story out there, and for something like UFOs, which is a bit of a fringe, that's a great thing for their position. So this might be the first big UFO story of its type that has kind of come out in this way, but I'm hoping that will kind of educate people a little about how seriously should we take stories like this when something like this happens again in the future, which it probably will.
Mick, finally, I'd like to steer you to another figure in the Parthenon of modern UFO UAP lore. An interesting figure, whom we have mentioned earlier, Dr. Gary Nolan. He was recently recorded on a New York-based seminar called SALT, in which he claimed he was 100% certain that we have and are being visited by aliens. Nolan is from Stanford University at the School of Medicine, his day job being a cancer immunologist. Nolan is interesting as a UFO UAP advocate, since he is a scientist, though far removed from astrophysics and related fields. Mick, what do you make of his claims about aliens?
Well, I think he does believe it. He's not making this stuff up. He's also deeply involved in this current thing with David Grusch. Like, he's been one of the people who's been accompanying Grusch. I accompanied him to a meeting with Canadian MPs. But Gary Nolan himself has been quite open about his beliefs, which are somewhat of the more unusual UFOs. He's not entirely a nuts and bolts type thing. He's very open to kind of slightly more supernatural type things, although he would frame, but obviously the supernatural is explainable by science because it's just a science we don't understand yet. So he'd probably frame it like that. But when he was young, he had encounters with beings in his bedroom, like as a young child, and then some other encounters, like another encounter with a UFO. And he's basically been in UFO culture for a long time, kind of secretly though. He knows that within academia, people don't respect UFO researchers. So I think he kind of did this on the down low for quite a while. He appeared in a book by Diana Pasulka called, I think, American Gothic. Was that what it called? Something like that. But it wasn't called American Gothic. It was something along those lines, though. But anyway, he appeared anonymously in the book. So he was like a researcher from a West Coast university, but he talked about his beliefs and things like that. So he's definitely a guy who's been in the community for a long time. He's a very clever scientist, but I think he goes into areas where he's not necessarily qualified to look, like metal analysis. He does a lot of metal analysis, and he might be responsible for some of the things that were talked about by Dave Grusch. So he's one of the prime movers of this current situation, and he's someone who has an honest belief that these aliens are real, possibly from another dimension. And he also believes in things like mediums. Like, he's a friend of Tyler Henry, the Hollywood medium to the stars, who summons the dead. So there's this weird overlap. You see it with other people as well. Leslie Kane also has written a book about life after death, and she's been to seances, and she gives credence to the claims of mediums who can materialize disembodied hands and things like that. There's a very interesting connection there. And Gary Nolan summed it all up, where he says, there's a word called woo, which means the paranormal or the supernatural. And Gary Nolan said, we stay away from the woo because it scares the bejesus out of people. But we know that the woo is always just around the corner, which is true. Within the UFO community, the woo, the supernatural, is just around the corner. A lot of people believe in it, and a lot of people think that it explains the UFOs, or UFOs explain the supernatural. And that again is a little concerning that so many people believe that.
Indeed. Well, Mick, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights into this intriguing topic. It's great to have your expertise on our show.
Thank you for an interesting conversation.
And to our audience, thanks for tuning into the Focus podcast. We hope that you found today's discussion enlightening and thought-provoking. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to us on social media. You can find the Focus on Facebook, referenced on the John Bruni and Sage International LinkedIn pages, and on YouTube or on the Sage International website, www.sageinternational.com.au, by clicking the media drop-down menu and hitting podcasts. And please leave us your comments on inquiries@sageinternational.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and or leave us a review on your favorite platform. My thanks to our stalwart production team of Malcolm Hughes and Neil Smart. Join us again next time as we continue to delve into the most pressing current affairs issues of our time. Until then, stay informed and stay engaged. I'm John Bruni, and you've been listening to The Focus.